Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Well, hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ayersman, and I'm grateful to be your host today for another episode of our podcast. I don't know about you, but I live in Wichita, and it is stinking cold outside. I think this week it got down to like negative 12 or something crazy like that, and it gets cold in Kansas, but this is just a whole nother level that I think no one knows what to do with. I'm currently home. My wife's school where she teaches got canceled today. My kid's daycare is closed. Seems like the whole world is just frozen and not really sure how to handle the situation that we're all in. So wherever you are today, I hope you're staying warm and doing well. We've got an important topic today. We're talking about finances and how we can honor God with our money. And our guest today is Nate Yoder from MB Foundation. And this is my first chance to get to talk to Nate, but he had a lot of really great content that I think you would find really helpful. And I don't know about you, but I feel like growing up, for sure my school and probably my church too, didn't really do a lot to provide me with practical resources for what to do with money. Like, I know that tithing is the right thing to do and you're supposed to save, but when you started getting into details about like what percentage should go here and what are stocks and bonds and 401ks and 403bs and should I get a mutual fund or a Roth or a IRA, and all that stuff was just pretty foreign to me up until just recently when I started doing some investing of my own. And so that's one of those, money's important. We all need money. Our society runs on money. Our churches need money. Our businesses, our families need money. And so, it can be kind of touchy to talk about sometimes, and we don't want to get too far into the weeds talking about hedge funds or whatever, but it is helpful, I think, to have a godly view of money and a healthy way that we can both view it and also use it and spend it in ways that honor God. And so today, Nate takes us through kind of a framework of a handful of different ways that we use our money. Nothing he shares here is probably entirely groundbreaking, but what it does is it provides just a healthy and helpful framework just to get us all on the same page. And if you're not really sure where to start with your money, or if you've never really had training about some of these things that Nate shares, I think his framework will be helpful just to kind of give you some confidence and some reassurance about ways that we can handle our finances well. So, and hey, I encourage you to listen closely because later on in the episode, Nate shares a special discount for our podcast listeners where the MB Foundation might be able to help you out with a couple things. So be sure to listen closely because you might be able to take advantage of that offer that they have for us today. I found Nate to be really fun to have a conversation with. I think you'll really enjoy him too. So we'll take a quick break from a word from our sponsor and get right to a conversation about honoring God with our finances with Nate Yoder.
The roots of MB Foundation can be found in the early history of the Mennonite Brethren people who were motivated to be generous so the gospel could be shared with their neighbors and around the world. In 1880, the conference first established a mission fund, a stewardship seed that has grown into a $251 million corporation known as MB Foundation. This stewardship idea has been serving the Mennonite Brethren family as a conduit for supporting ministries and kingdom building for 140 years. MB Foundation is celebrating its rich history and the 30-year anniversary of incorporation. We remain committed to providing biblical financial stewardship solutions, including planned giving services, loans, investment certificates, fund management, and stewardship education. Whether making a gift to your church, planning your will, or investing for the future, MB Foundation can help you in giving meaning to money. Contact us today at www.mbfoundation.com or 1-800-551-1547 to get started. MB Foundation is pleased to partner with USMB to bring you this episode of Lead Pods.
All right, my friends. Well, today I'm joined by Nate Yoder, who works at MB Foundation. I think he's out there in Fresno, so we're excited to talk to him. As we're in February now, some of you probably are still working through some New Year's resolutions. Maybe finances are on your mind. So we've got a real financial expert on the line with us today. So Nate, thank you so much for spending some time with us.
Hey, Matt, thanks. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So we were chatting a little bit. You're kind of relatively new to the MB family, and you've been at the foundation for a few months. So why don't you just give us a background about you and what you do at MB Foundation?
Sure. So I pastored a number of churches for about 20 years. Some in Pennsylvania, actually one in Ontario, Canada. And then in 2015, my family, we moved to Fresno, California. And I was the executive director for West Coast MCC for 5 years. We found our church home at North Fresno MB Church here in Fresno. And then in September, I started here at the foundation as Chief Development Officer. And that really just involves working with our planned giving advisors. What's planned giving? We'll talk about that later. And also working with just resourcing our churches in the area of stewardship. We also provide church loans and just trying to expand our services to both help people manage their money well. And then as these resources are freed up to make a difference in the kingdom, to help spread those out as well.
Very cool. And I'm sure most people listening have at least heard of MB Foundation, and they're probably kind of vaguely familiar of what you do. But in case there's some kind of newer folks listening, can you explain what the MB Foundation actually is and what the services they offer?
Sure. MB Foundation, we say our purpose is to give meaning to money, to help money be used for kingdom purposes. And we provide loans to churches, loans to pastors. We provide investment opportunities that individuals can basically put money with us for savings. And that's what's used for the loans to go to churches. And then we help people with estate planning and plan giving, ways to maximize their gifts in a way that save on taxes, have a biggest impact toward whatever cause God puts on their heart. And again, we'll talk about some of those a bit later, but we resource churches, pastors, and people to make a difference with their money for God's work.
So to kind of get the conversation rolling here, I know you and the staff at MB Foundation recently went through a book, God Owns It All by Ron Blue. So we might use that as kind of a little bit of our framework today, but just to kind of get the ball rolling here, obviously finances are part of all of our lives. We all have to earn, we all have to spend money. Some people probably put more thought into it more than others. And some people are probably in a pretty good spot financially, and some might be kind of hurting this, especially with everything that's been going on in the past year or so. So why don't you just start with an overview? What are some kind of the basic principles that you think we all need to be aware of in order to be financially healthy, first of all, but then also doing that in a way that honors God also?
Yeah, so you mentioned Ron Blue's resource, God Owns It All. And actually, we as a staff at MB Foundation went through this. It's about a 6-session study just last year, and it was really helpful. But he reminds us, even before we get into sort of how you do it and how you manage money well, we need to start with our perspective, with our attitude, how we relate to money. And all of us are shaped by experiences, by the family we grew up in. There are many things that impact how we even view money. And he reminds us that we should start and examine what's our attitude towards money. Interestingly, I was reading a pastor by the name of Tim Keller, well-known pastor from Manhattan. And he talks about how in all his years of pastoring, he's had people confess all kinds of sins to him. But he has yet to have one person confess and say, I think I'm a little greedy.
Oh, wow.
And so that hit me when I read that. It's a reminder, I really do need to examine and let God's Spirit just speak to me about how I relate to money. And, biblically, the foundation, one verse that's big for us is Psalm 24, verse 1, which just says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. So, that's where this phrase, God owns it all, comes from. It ultimately is all his. All that we have is really a gracious gift from God. And then we have to remember that our security and our significance comes from God, not from our bank account or the possessions that we have. So I think even before you start talking about how am I managing the numbers in my assets and checkbook, we need to say, is my attitude, is my heart towards money in line with what God has called me to be in that area?
Yeah, so I think we were just chatting a little bit briefly beforehand that really there's some kind of hacks or tips or whatever for managing your money well, but a lot of it really is just discipline of being smart, being wise, spending less than you make. Like a lot of those things, it's not, super trendy to talk about, but that's kind of the best way to be successful manage your money is just some of those kind of basic disciplines, right?
No, it's so true. I know we're in January here, but in a couple of weeks, Major League Baseball teams will be having spring training, and these professional athletes will do the same basic drills that Little League kids all across the country do, right? Like there's just certain basics you just have to do. And
Right.
it's not so much amazing new insight, it's just how you do it. So, you said earlier, you referred to me as a financial guru. I might correct you on that. But we'll let Ron Blue be our guru. We mentioned his study already. And he talks about viewing your money as kind of 5 pieces of a pie.
Okay.
There's what you live on, there's what you give, there's what you owe as far as any debt, there is what you owe as far as taxes,
Okay.
and then there's what you grow, your savings and your investments. And I just find that kind of a helpful analogy, even a helpful visual to think of what are the pieces of the pie. Am I paying enough attention to the different pieces? So if you're okay with it, what if we just use that as an outline, as sort of our discussion as we go about?
I love it. So, okay. So money that we live on. So what kind of tips would you have to share about being responsible with the piece of the pie about the money that we live on?
Well, this is just basic. I mean, this is really the first piece, if you will, because you have to spend less than you earn. You just have to, or nothing else works. It's a little bit like exercise. Every person will tell you, you can't out exercise a bad diet, right? Like it just doesn't work. And it's the same way with your money. So you have to live within the limits of what you make, or you have to grow the pie, which may or may not be possible. But it's amazing how often, even as people make more money, they just spend more and this live gets bigger. So I think the biggest tip there is to just say, do you know where your money is going? Do you even know what you're spending your money on? I remember when I was in college, and I did an experiment for like 2 weeks. I literally wrote down every penny just in a notebook that I spent. And I was shocked at the end of 2. I thought I was being careful, being frugal. I thought I was, being pretty careful. And then I was shocked when I read, wow, I spent this much money. So I think that's the start. Like, do you even know what it actually cost you with your current lifestyle? You can do that with a spreadsheet. You can write it on a piece of paper. There are also lots of apps out there. So like a really good one, if you don't necessarily want to have a detailed budget, but you just want to see where your money's going. And especially if you buy most of your things with, credit card, debit card, is mint.com. It's just a simple app and it'll show you. There's another one out there called, it's at everydollar.com. That's a little bit more of a detailed budget, but there are lots of tools out there that will help you get a handle on this. So that's the first step to me, is just knowing what you're actually spending your money on.
So I personally use Mint, and I think it's awesome. Like you said, it's really easy. It kind of categorizes everything and spits it into charts for you and all kinds of stuff like that. So it's really helpful.
That's cool. Like I haven't used Mint, so like I'm just gonna turn the round question to you here. Like what's, to someone who's new, what would you say is the best thing it does, and how easy is it to use?
I personally find it to be pretty easy. And the coolest thing for me is it does make charts for you. So you can see, okay, I spend this much on housing expenses. I spend this much on utilities. I spend this much on food or restaurants or gas. So it kind of does a lot of that for you. So it's not a whole lot of work. It's pretty much automated from your credit card or debit card. So it's pretty handy. Cool. But that leads me to one of my questions for you. So I think a lot of us, I admit, like my wife and I, we don't really have like a really detailed budget. I know some people are really good at that. They're really disciplined at sticking to that. And like you said, documenting each expense, but it just takes time. It takes discipline. It's hard for some people. And so I'm curious what you or the foundation would say about how important is it to actually go to detailed budgeting, or as long as you're spending less than you're earning, is that kind of good enough?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. And honestly, I've tried both. Like there was times in our married life, we kind of tracked every detail. I was following on Quicken and other spreadsheets, and that kind of became a bit of a pain. The key is, what are your, and we'll talk about this more a bit later, but what are your goals? Do you know, generally speaking, like, what is that percentage? I mean, if you're
Yeah.
off a few dollars one way or the other, and pay yourself first, So like, what's your savings plan? So like,
Mhm.
I know some people say I can't track it all, but they even just have an automatic transfer from their paycheck into savings. So it
Yep.
doesn't even show up in their checking and they don't see it.
Right.
Uh, so some of it's personality, some people spend less if they use cash instead of credit card,
Mm-hmm.
and others just track it real closely on an app and say, oh, I can't do it. So there's many ways, but the main thing is you have to make sure the most important things are getting paid first. So I'm not, maybe that's a non-answer, but I think it does vary. But as long as you are not spending more than you make, and as
Mm-hmm.
long as you are doing some savings and other stuff like that, I think
Yep.
there's lots of ways that you can do it.
Good. Awesome. Well, like you said, that's kind of the base of the pie, I guess, if you will, because there's just certain expenses you're going to have every month. But hopefully you have enough left over for things like giving. So let's talk about giving a little bit.
Yeah, so giving generously is the second piece of the pie that Ron says. And he says this is important because giving breaks the power of money that it has over us.
Mm-hmm.
And the last church I pastored was in Ontario, Canada. The last wedding I officiated at, there was the aunt of the bride came at, kind of open mic, came to give some wedding advice. And it's at a wedding, there's a couple hundred people. She says, I want to give you some wedding advice. We learned this from, grandpa. We didn't understand it, but it really made a difference in our marriage. This is really, really important. You have to do this. And everyone's just kind of on the edge of their seat. Okay, what's this almost magical wedding advice, right? And the aunt says, be sure to tithe. And people don't know that term. Tithing is giving 10% of your income. And the whole crowd of the wedding guests burst out laughing. They thought she was joking.
Oh, wow.
And she had the mic and she just said, like with this almost stern voice, like, no, I'm serious. Like, this really matters. And I'll never forget it.
Yeah.
But here was someone saying, it's this whole thing of it's important because it reminds us what matters.
Mm-hmm.
It helps break that need to always give or always get more. And so
Mm-hmm.
we strongly encourage everyone should give. Often we hear about the tithe, which is 10%. But even that can become a legalistic thing. If someone have never given before and they're super strapped, you know what, to start at 5%, that's a great start.
Yeah.
There's
Mm-hmm.
some people who have huge financial resources.
Yep.
And frankly, a tithe is a tip. Like they could give, there are people who maybe giving 5% is more of a sacrifice than those who could maybe give 30.
Yeah.
And so It really is, how am I positioning myself to stretch a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
to give in a way that maybe even is a sacrifice.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds me that my calling in this world is not about what all I get, but it's to bless and be a part of God's work. So to me, that's the biggest thing. Tithing and giving, it should be a journey. And how do I take the next step in that journey for what God is calling me to do? And there's even stages of life, like in my wife and I's experience, there was a season where we were able to give a good bit over 10%, and then stage of life changed and it went back down a little bit. And now we're able to bring it back up again. So, and I don't think people should feel guilty about that. It's just, how do you keep being more open, more generous?
So one kind of specific question for you on that. I know, again, some people I think get kind of caught in the details about tithing and things like this. Like, oh, should I tithe on my net or my gross? And should I tithe my tax return? And should I hear kind of those kinds of questions a lot. And then I've heard people ask, well, I really love Compassion International or Red Cross or whatever. Is it okay for my tithe to go to one of those places, or does the tithe need to go out of the church? So I hear you saying like the heart is really the most important thing, right? And I think that's what God would say. I mean, I want to be careful speaking for God, but he talks about the heart of givers, right? So where do you land on some of those kinds of nitty gritty detail things? Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, those questions always come up. Let's start with where to give. I mean, I think, you read scripture, part of the Old Testament, part of the offerings supported the priests and Levites. So absolutely, I think some of it should go to your local church. This is often the primary place where, we have community, where God's word is preached to us. So I think absolutely some should go to local church. I think some should go to the spread of the gospel, and absolutely some should go to caring for the poor. I mean, Jesus is very clear. When you care for the poor, you're serving him. So I kind of think of it in those sort of three different buckets, if you will. So, but I don't get legalistic about it.
Sure.
As far as your tithe, your net, well, are we asking that question because we want to give as much as possible? Or are we asking that question because I want to give enough, not any more than I have to, and not feel guilty?
Right.
And if that's the case, I think you've answered the own question.
Right.
And so, to me, it's how do I expand in generosity? And rather than what can I do and not feel guilty? That's missing the whole point. So absolutely, I encourage to give generously, gross tithe. The better question is, what can I do to increase that every year?
Right.
Whether I remember a guy years ago said him and his wife were giving 10%, and they decided to increase it by 0.5% every year. And 20 years later, they were at 20%. So to me, that's more significant than what's the minimum. But I would add one other thing about giving.
Sure.
All that we've talked about is giving of cash, right? And 90% of the wealth in the US is in your assets. And this is a lot of what we do at the foundation to help people off of my estate. I've had some investments that did really well. This is what we call planned giving. And we have ways that you can save on taxes you would have paid and give blessed charities. You can often save on taxes, bless charities, still pass some on to your children through an inheritance. So don't limit giving just to what you bring home in a paycheck. This is where, again, our advisors love to engage with people, because often people's biggest single one-time donation is what they give through their estate. And so generosity literally can even continue even beyond your lifetime. And that can be really exciting.
Well, while we're on the topic of will, I know you and I, again, we talked briefly that really everyone does have a will, whether they know it or not. You want to explain what that means?
Yeah, absolutely. We're all going to leave this earth someday. And when we do, if you do not have a will or a trust in place, guess what? Your state has written one for you, and they will determine where things go. So everyone has a will or some sort of estate plan. The question is, did you write it or did the state write it? And so that's actually a lot of what we do at the foundation. We help people walk through, plan their sort of estates. We call it a biblical estate design. And actually right now we're running a special. Contact our office, and you can go to our website and you can see mbfoundation.com, and you can see more information about this. But the first 10 people that complete this process with us, we will contribute $250 toward any attorney fees. And we actually have a number of attorneys who already give very, very reasonable rates. So, that don't let the cost stop you. But it is, when you stop and think about it, I don't know of hardly anyone who says, you know what, I'm happy to have the state determine that.
Right.
And if you have young children, it's actually a very important thing to make sure that that's cared for. We all hope that's not needed, but tragically sometimes it is. So thanks for bringing that up. But it's an important thing.
Yeah. Well, while we're on that, I have to admit, there's one thing I don't know, I don't understand. Can you explain the difference between a will and a trust?
Yeah, the biggest difference is, and it can vary slightly from state to state, but there's a couple differences. The biggest difference is a trust. When you die, if your assets are in a trust, it does not go through probate. And if it's a will, even if you wrote it, it goes through a probate process, which can take longer in actually settling your estate. In some states, California, for example, probate can be pretty expensive. So that's the other piece. Even the cost to get any attorney set up now, you may more than save whenever your estate is settled. A will is open to the public. a trust stays private.
Okay.
Those are two of the big differences. You can, yeah. So it's,
Gotcha.
for many people, a trust is fairly easy to set up, and it actually works. There are significant advantages over a will, but writing your own will is still better than having the state write your will. And again, that's stuff that our advisors can help people walk through and figure out.
Cool. Awesome. Well, it's all really helpful info. That's great. All right. So we have veered off the pie just a little bit. So let's go back. So that was all in the give piece. So money that we owe. So we don't have a whole lot of control over the taxes we pay. But we do have a little bit of, well, we have a lot of control over our debt. So do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, and that, just a quick word about the taxes. Ron Blue even talks about, none of us like to pay taxes, but actually that's even a cause for gratitude, he says, because you don't pay taxes if you didn't have income. So that's to me, that's a helpful reminder. And again, especially when it comes to saving of taxes from appreciated assets, whether it's land or property or investments you had, we can help save significantly on that.
Cool.
So, but yeah, avoiding debt. Then this is where many Americans get in trouble. Certainly some debt is reasonable. A reasonable debt on a house is going to create economic value down the road, right? Although I would say this, and a guy named Matt Bell talks about this in one of his books, The Proven Path to Uncommon Financial Success. But many mortgage companies will approve you for more mortgage than what you can comfortably carry. And so you also want to be careful. There's, I forget, is it 28%? You shouldn't spend more on your housing, and total debt shouldn't be more than, I think, 36. But you can easily take on even more good debt, quote unquote, in a way that straps you, and so you want to still be careful with that. But reasonable debt for your purchase of business or a home, or even reasonable educational debt is one thing. That's not what we're talking about. But the debt that really tends to get people is consumer debt, credit cards, lines of credit, cars. Some people say don't even buy for a car. Others say, well, you can borrow for a car as long as it's, reasonable. People are going to differ on that. But again, go back to know where your money's going. You can easily get approved for more debt than what you will want. Right. And so you really want to pay attention to that, because that pie gets paid. If not, someone comes knocking on your door. But what do you do if you have too much debt? So one of the, obviously you can start saving. Again, know where your money goes. If you're buying lunch every day and you're totally strapped, but what happens if you pack a lunch? And what if you put that money towards your debt? Some people say start with the highest interest rate. I actually like the idea of start with your lowest amount of debt, or let's say you have 3 consumer debts, 2 credit cards and a line of credit. Okay. Start by paying off the one that has the lowest balance. So you make your minimum payment on the others. Any extra you pay on the smallest. Then when that one's done, like psychologically, it's a relief. You celebrate, right? Maybe you go buy lunch that day to celebrate, because that spurs you on. Right. But then you get right back on the plan, and that money you were paying on that debt, you pay on the next highest level. Meanwhile, you're still paying your minimum payments. And it's what they call the debt reduction snowball. And it begins to, when you see that one debt gone, it gives you motivation to keep going. So yes, from an absolute number standpoint, you save a little more if you start with the highest interest rate. But from a stick at it, how do I dig out of this hole? I think that debt snowball process is really, really helpful for a lot of people.
Because it helps to get a victory in there, right? To have a box you can check and cross off and celebrate. So I understand.
You get the feeling of I did it.
Yes.
This seemed overwhelming. Now I did it, and it just spurs you on to keep going.
Cool. Okay. Anything else on debt or taxes you want to hit on?
No, actually, one thing I would just say about debt, and this maybe even goes back to the whole thing of spend less than you earn. If you're struggling to put a budget together, if you're kind of overwhelmed with debt, this might feel a little risky, but there might be someone in your church or someone who you would trust. And you could even go and say, hey, I think you might I see you manage this well. You might be able to help. And let someone else walk with you and encourage you. Like, you don't have to face this totally alone. Again, it's a little vulnerable, but boy, to have a cheerleader and a helpful coach can really just help you make great progress down the path.
Yep, that's good. All right. So if I remember right, I think the last one is to grow. So talk about how we can grow our money pies a little bit.
Yeah. So two pieces about this. One, in order to grow, you have to plan for some margin. The unexpected is going to happen.
Yeah.
So, short term, a lot of people recommend saving 3 to 6 months of your living expenses, which, by the way, if you need a place to put some of that money, MB Foundation has what we call certificates. We offer pretty competitive interest rates, probably better than what you'd get at a local bank. And your money earns you interest, and it goes to help churches, looking to build. So if you're looking to play a place to save your short-term investments, do that. But again, this gets back to paying yourself first. You don't have to get to 3 or 6 months overnight. And if you're not doing this, like I said, set up. Every bank lets you do this, right? You get a paycheck, automatic transfer from your checking to a savings or to an account at the foundation. Even if it's $50 a paycheck, even if it's $100 a paycheck, just start doing it and automate it. Don't wait to have to remember, automate it. And then longer term, it's helpful to also have longer term goals so that you don't lose sight of that in the moment. So I want to have saved $5,000 for a car in 2 years or in a year. Then that moment when you're really tempted to spend on something else, if you don't have that goal, most of us will spend it short term, right?
Yeah, right.
But if we have a goal, it can really, really be helpful. So whether it's for bigger purchases, whether it's for saving for your kids, have a goal, and then retirement. The biggest single thing for having enough retirement is not finding the magic next Apple that's going to go through the roof in stock price. It's just saving regularly. If you start at 25 and save consistently up to your 35 and stop, and if you start at 35 and save the same amount up till 55 or 60, you will have about the same when you get to 65. And the difference is the longer money is there, it grows, right? And every time it grows, so you have 2,000, it grows to 4,000, and it grows to 8,000, right? Yep. When you start earlier, by the time you retire, your money's doubled one more time. And it's that last doubling, right? We call it the magic of compound interest. That's what really makes the difference. So my daughter's 22, she's first year teaching. And one of the biggest things I said is yeah, you could use an extra $1,000, but your employer will match that.
Yeah.
Start doing that. And you'll figure out how to not spend $1,000 over the course of a year. But when you get to be 65, it'll be really, really helpful. So keep the long-term plan and goal. And if you're not saving for retirement, if your employer has a company match and you're not using that, by all means, that's, as we say, low-hanging fruit. That's just there to really help you.
So you're saying we shouldn't throw all of our life savings into Bitcoin? Is that what you're telling me?
No, that would not be a company recommendation,
Okay, good. Just need to have that on the record just to make sure I understood.
That's right. And some are going, what is Bitcoin, huh?
Yeah. Google it. It's too hard to explain.
That's true.
So Nate, one thing I've always thought, I see this, there's little memes that pop up every once in a while that it seems to me in high school and college, we learned all kinds of these things that I don't use a whole lot of complicated math or chemistry or a lot of those kinds of things in my day-to-day life. But I feel like the education system really doesn't do a good job of teaching us about money, especially about some of the things you were just talking about. So I'll just be honest, for me, I'm 32. So for me, I don't know hardly anything about, well, I've learned a lot over the past couple of years, but before I was intentional, no one had taught me about stocks or bonds or Roths or IRAs or any of that. That was never really a part of my upbringing too much. So if someone has a little bit, let's say they have, $50, $100 a month that they want to work on growing, but they were where I was a few months ago or a few years ago and really have no idea. Should they put it in a savings account? Should they do something with, some big investment company or just put it in a 403B or whatever? What if they've got a little bit they want to work on saving? where should they start if they're not really sure where to get started?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for MB pastors, we actually do have a retirement plan that you can be a part of. So that wouldn't apply to everyone, but for pastors, again, you can call us and we can help. So if you have $1,500 a month, you say, so here's what I'd say. First of all, do you have a emergency 3 to 6 month emergency fund?
Okay.
If not, I would start with that.
Okay.
I would build that up. I would have that there, and I would have that in a savings account, or maybe some of it in savings, some of it in like a CD or something like some investments that we have. So I would start with that. Then some would say, once you get that filled, should you start planning for your kids' college education? Others, and I would tend to agree, would say, save for your retirement. And where do you put that? Well, if your employer does have a retirement match program, start with that, because some will match up to 3%, up to 4%, up to 6%, but you have to put some in. So even if it means reducing your take-home pay, you're not paying taxes on that. And again, it's getting matched, so you're already getting a return on your money.
Yep.
And if you don't have that, you want it more long-term, I would look at, if you want an investment, I'd go to a Vanguard, Fidelity. There are what they call index funds, and for a beginning investor, they're low cost, very low fees. You can get funds that automatically will take less risk for you. They're called target date funds. Automatically give less risk to you as you get closer to retirement. You can pick funds that will be just like track the whole market. So this is all me speaking, not the foundation. So I want to be clear, but that's just some basic stuff. And again, find someone in your church that might know this. If you don't have a will and all this is confusing, call us, and our advisors can also give you basic advice. But the best question is, even more than finding the perfect investment, is I have this extra. How do I do it intentionally? And if you do that, short term and then long term, you'll be in a good place.
Good. That's great. I can't remember the stat off the top of my head, but I was surprised recently. I think especially with COVID, some of the stats I've seen about how few, or how small the percentage is of how many Americans have $1,000 of cash accessible right now. And it's, again, I don't remember the exact number, but it's pretty shockingly low how much the average person has just available in savings. And I just know, like, just living with some margin, just one less thing to worry about, gives you so much freedom in your life. So I think, like we said at the beginning, just taking some of these steps to be disciplined really can make a huge difference in how you live your day-to-day life. So.
Well, and some people may say, I don't really have margin, but let's say you pay off all your credit cards. Well, now start making that payment to savings. Let's say you had a car loan and you paid it off. Keep making that car payment, but pay yourself in a savings account, because your car is going to wear out someday, right?
Right.
So there are a lot, because if you don't do that and suddenly your car breaks down, guess what? You find a way to make the money or make the payment, because you have to have a car, right?
Right.
So again, it's just about how do we purposely direct this so that we have margin that frees us to give, that frees us to bless our families, bless others. Yeah, it's just a better place to live.
Absolutely. I agree. Okay, well, we're starting to wrap up out of time here, but is there anything else you want to talk about today, Nate?
No, I think all I would just say is it's a journey, and it doesn't matter if we're 25 or 65. We live in a culture that's always telling us, collect more, your values and what you own and you possess. And we follow a God who says your value comes in loving and serving. Yeah. And has given us wisdom in scripture, how to manage it. And so if you're feeling overwhelmed, don't be discouraged, just start taking steps. If you think you've arrived, well, open yourself up. The Spirit might have new things for you to do in the area of money. That's probably all I'd have to say.
And I'm sure people can go to, you said mbfoundation.com, is that right? Or if they have questions or need some help getting some of this stuff figured out, what's the best way to get in touch?
mbfoundation.com, and all our contact information is there. You can pull up all the different things that we do. Again, planned giving. If the terms of the different, we talk about annuities and about trust, don't let that confuse you. It's just, there are ways we can help you strategically save taxes, give, and bless your children in your planning. So give us a call. We'd love to just engage and help on this stewardship journey that we're all on.
Well, that's great, Nate. Thank you. I feel like it's been really helpful and just a good way to break it all down today. So thank you so much for your time and all the great work you do for MB Foundation.
Hey, thanks. It's great to be here. Appreciate what you do for these podcasts and blessing the MB world.
We know it's possible to feel more isolated than ever in the midst of a fast-paced world that is at our fingertips. Many of us are looking for connection. Lead cohorts are small online gathering places for our USMB family to fellowship and learn about specific topics together. This isn't just one more Zoom meeting to attend. This is an opportunity, starting in late February, to foster community. We all need connection. Register for a lead cohort today by visiting usmb.org/lead-cohorts.
All right, well, once again, I want to give my thanks to Nate Yoder for talking with us today and for the many helpful things he had to share with us. And, again, sometimes the church has kind of a weird reputation, or we're not always sure how to talk about money, but, Jesus had a lot to say about money, and how we spend and how we save and how we give is an important part of how we live as Christians. And so I hope you enjoyed that conversation. And if Nate had anything to say that challenged you, or if you have anything you need to work on, I encourage you to get in touch with MB Foundation and see if they can help you out with any of those things. I do want to give a quick shout out to our friends over at the Christian Leader magazine. We don't do that often enough, but many of you probably received the January-February issue a few weeks ago, and I was flipping through it the other day and I realized there's quite a few podcast alums in this issue. So this most recent issue talked a lot about racism, and they had a piece from Dina Gonzalez-Pena, who you might remember talked with us just a few weeks ago, and there's a piece from Terry Hunt, and we're actually going to be talking to him on the podcast here in just a couple weeks. So just a reminder that that's a really great publication that is also part of our MB family, and there's lots of great news and stories that will probably be helpful and relevant to you and your church family. So be sure to check out the most recent issue of Christian Leader, and our many thanks to our friends over there for the many great things that they're doing over there for our church family as well. All right, well, I think with that, we'll wrap up today's episode. So thank you again so much for listening. And if you haven't yet, I invite you to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And be sure to follow us on social media. And as always, I'd appreciate your help spreading the word. So if you found this episode to be helpful or enjoyable or entertaining, we'd love your help to spread the word by sharing it on social media, shoot a link to a friend in a text or an email. Help us to help more and more people find this content that we're cranking out for you. So until next time, have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon right here on the Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.